What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I am your host, Andy Herman. Thank you so much for joining me today. Could not be happier to be back talking Green Bay Packers here on the Pack a Day podcast with you all. First of all, a huge shout out to Jacob Westendorf, Andrew Merteg, Kyle Fellows, Jake Morley, and Ross Uglum for pitching in and helping out while I was out. Had some travel, had some COVID, had a little bit of everything. So I've been sort of through the ringer over the last week, but had great guests to fill in for me. So thank you to all of them for filling in while I was out. And thank you to those who were able to listen to them and as they provided great content while I was out. But for better or for worse, probably for worse, I plan to be back now for the foreseeable future. I am basically out of PTO at this point. I'm sure there will be a substitute here or there, but for the most part, no upcoming vacations or anything like that. And as I mentioned, I could not be more excited about talking Packers with you again today. So let's jump in right away and get started because I want to talk about the news and notes from Packers OTAs. Now, unfortunately, I was unable to attend OTAs myself due to my current status on the COVID list, but there was a lot of great notes surrounding the team as the incredible group that covers the team on a daily basis, the beat writers, Wes Hodkiewicz on Packers.com, Larry McCarron had a great update, Matt Schneidman, Bill Huber, you know the names. They all did a tremendous job of covering the team. And even though I wasn't there, again, there was a ton of stuff to discuss as well as Matt LaFleur's press conference. So let's jump in with the topic that I think has been at the forefront somewhat, and that's Aaron Rodgers' status or availability or lack thereof. The fact that he was not at Packers OTAs, which was not a huge surprise. And we should start off by saying these are, in fact, voluntary, right? So he does not have to be there. He is not breaching anything. He is not breaking anything. And this was expected that he was not going to be there. So Aaron Rodgers not being at OTAs is a story only because he's Aaron Rodgers and he's not at OTAs. But there's no major story here. But it has been a discussion point, right? And I think the first question is, should it matter that he's not there? He's the leader of this team. He's the leader of the franchise, the face of the franchise. Should he be there? So I think there's a couple things that are worth noting here. A, does Aaron Rodgers need to be there for his own sake? B, does he need to be there for his wide receivers who are new and need to get on the same page as him? And then C, does it mean anything else that he's not there? So the first one I think is relatively simple. Aaron Rodgers has not attended OTAs or mini camps or anything in the offseason for 2 seasons straight, one due to COVID, one due to holding out, and it did not affect him at all. In fact, he won back-to-back MVPs. I have next to zero concern that Aaron Rodgers is going to come in and be anything less than himself, at least due to not attending OTAs or mini camps or anything like that. If he doesn't attend those, mini camps are mandatory, so we can just have a different discussion at that point, but it sounds like he's going to be there for those. But we can have a discussion if he has a decline in anything based on anything else that you want. I don't think that his any decline this season will be because he didn't attend OTAs. And he has shown over the last 2 years, if anything, he's earned the right over the last 2 years to not have to attend OTAs and everyone know and be under the belief that he is going to be not only just fine, but probably play at an MVP level once again. So for his own sake, for his practice and for his getting ready for the season, I think it's safe to say that no, unequivocally, he does not need to be at OTAs. The next one is the wide receiver debate. All right, Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure. Like, you've got a lot of new wide receivers. Amari Rodgers is only in his second year. Like, there are a lot of weapons who could use additional time with Aaron Rodgers. I think that's a fair assessment to make. So clearly, you would want Aaron Rodgers there to work with those wide receivers. I actually feel quite the opposite. And there was some mumbling or, rumblings, I guess, of this yesterday as well. But this is a point that I've made a couple times on here already. So the point being is that all of these new wide receivers have by far in a way enough to learn with just the Matt LaFleur playbook and how he wants them to play wide receiver before Aaron Rodgers gets in their ear and starts basically teaching them another form of the offense. So as I've mentioned on numerous occasions, had a chance to talk to Tyler Merritt's, former Wisconsin Badger who played with Matt LaFleur in Tennessee, and asked him what the most difficult position to learn in Matt LaFleur's offense was. And he point blank, without hesitation, said wide receiver. Again, it is very, very clear that wide receiver is a very difficult position to learn in this offense, and they will have plenty to learn on their own before Aaron Rodgers is there, just getting the nuance of that position down. Marquez Valdes-Scantling last year, in a interview that he did with Tyler Dunn, basically said that also there are two offenses to learn in Green Bay, Matt LaFleur's and Aaron Rodgers. And Rodgers has his own set of audibles that he uses and his own sort of expectations. So there's a whole second offense to learn. Well, if you are just coming into a new job and learning one aspect of that job, it's like having one boss, and then like now week 2, a different boss comes in and gives you a new set of expectations. Now like your mind is swimming all over the place. Like, let me just master that first boss's expectations first before boss number 2 comes in training camp and then starts telling me where I need to be, what I need to do different, and those sort of things. So I actually think that this gives the newer wide receivers a really good opportunity to learn the Matt LaFleur version first before Rodgers comes in and now changes a couple of those things, makes a little of his own tweaks, adds some audibles, adds some of his own expectations, etc. I think there is plenty to learn. So that part too, also don't think Aaron Rodgers needs to be there. Now, the one area where I think we can have a conversation on is, what does this mean for the rest of the team? Now, I very clearly do not want to jump to any conclusions here. So players that weren't at OTAs besides Aaron Rodgers included Allen Lazard, Sammy Watkins, Mercedes Lewis, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, Randy Ramsey, Jonathan Garvin, Jair Alexander, and Rasul Douglas. So those are the players who were not at OTAs besides Aaron Rodgers, 9 players in total. All 9 of those players may have had something significant going on in their life where they legitimately could not have been there, and it may have not had anything to do, like in their mind, they may have not even considered what Aaron Rodgers was doing or anything like that, right? So I don't want to make this conclusion or this jump to a conclusion from point A to point B without knowing any of the information, right? But in general, in just general conversation, I think the topic that's worth mentioning here is, would it have mattered for any of these players, or does it start to matter for any of these players if the leader of their team, their quarterback, their MVP, feels like OTAs aren't necessary, even though they're not mandatory, if they're not necessary? And what I mean by that is, let's just take Watkins, Lazard, Mercedes Lewis, right? Now, I want to say it again, all 3 of them may not have shown up regardless of what Aaron Rodgers did. But for those weapons, if Aaron Rodgers is there, Lazard and Watkins and Mercedes might have a little bit more inkling of saying, hey, if 12 is there, I can't miss that time. Like, I've got to make sure that I am on the same page as him. Whereas if 12 isn't there, they might be able to say, all right, I'll get back on the same page with Rodgers when he eventually gets there. And again, I'm not making the correlation. I'm not saying that's the case, but there could be a little bit more pressure on those sort of players if Aaron Rodgers is there. The same maybe goes for Jair Alexander, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith. If they know that Rodgers is going to be there, they might be like, man, if 12 is going to be there, I know I better be there. And certainly for guys like Jonathan Garvin, Randy Ramsey, like those sort of players who need the reps, you would hope and wish that they were there as well. So worth saying one more time, we have no idea why any of the 10 weren't there, and all of the 10, including Rodgers, may have had very legitimate reasons for not being there, whether it be due to COVID protocols, whether it be due to family emergencies. We simply don't know. So I'm not making a jump to a conclusion on anything, much less the status of those 10 players. All 10 may have very serious reasons as to why they weren't there. And even if they didn't, once again, it's voluntary. But my point being is that if this starts being a thing where, all right, the leader and commander of the team isn't there, so now I'm more questioning if I need to be there, that could be something worth monitoring over time. Because while it doesn't matter if Aaron Rodgers is there, we just discussed that in detail, it does matter for almost everyone else on the team. I don't really care if Kenny Clark is there, Jair Alexander. Like, once you reach a certain point, I'm not super concerned about things. But like 99% of that roster, outside of a handful of exceptions, should probably be there and doing everything in their power to get there. And if they start seeing that Rodgers and maybe stars like Gary and Jair don't start going to these, it could have a trickle effect over time. Not saying it did, not saying it will, but if there's anything about the Rodgers conversation that could have some merit to it, that could be the thing. So we'll just have to sort of keep an eye on that over time. Now, as far as the players that weren't there, right? Rodgers, Lazard, Watkins, Mercedes, Preston, Gary, Ramsey, Garvin, Jair, and Rasul. I do think this opened up a couple of unique opportunities, right? So no Lazard and Watkins means that those rookie wide receivers are going to potentially get some more playing time along with Amari Rodgers, right? So that's going to open up some additional snaps for some players who could really use those additional snaps. Green Bay is going to need Romeo Doubs, Amari Rodgers, and Christian Watson, maybe even Samori Toure at some point this season, and them getting extra snaps now is not the worst thing in the world. Meanwhile, at edge, Preston, Gary, Ramsey, Garvin, a lot of players missing. That gives a guy like Kingsley Enagbare, maybe a Tipa Naliai, a lot more opportunity to get some additional snaps that they could sorely use to potentially get ready for this season as well. So while there are some absences for whatever reason, that does open up some opportunities. And based on those absences, rookie wide receivers and Kingsley Enagbare really benefit from the players that aren't there and potentially picking up some additional snaps. In addition, there were a handful of players that were not practicing. So David Bakhtiari, Kylan Hill, Elton Jenkins, Robert Tonyan, all coming off significant injuries, all not expected to practice. Were not practicing. Dean Lowry was also not practicing. So those were the five. I guess we should probably discuss David Bakhtiari a little bit further because while he is coming off a major injury, there would have had to have at least been some hope if he was almost getting ready to play and even did play in a game in the regular season finale against Detroit, that by this time in May, now a year and a half after the initial injury, there would have been maybe some hope that he's just good to go. And that's not the case. He is still working with the rehab group. So don't also want to jump to any conclusions here. We don't have any injury update. Matt LaFleur said he's working hard and all of the things that he really said for a huge portion of last year as well. But there does have to be at least some level of concern that if there was a game today, would David Bakhtiari be able to play? And I know there's not a game today and we're still 4 months away, but we are a year and a half post David Bakhtiari initial injury. And if he can't play today, that is extremely concerning in some capacity. I don't think I'm breaking any news there. So I don't want to be Debbie Downer on this because my guess is no matter what, they're going to be extremely cautious with him. And they really probably don't care what he does until week 1 of the regular season. He doesn't need the reps. We saw against Detroit, he basically went in that game without any practice or anything, and he looked fantastic. So I think they're going to be just extremely comfortable with him at left tackle whenever he's ready to go. But man, if he is, still not ready, that just has to generate some level of concern. And don't want to put anything more towards that because there's a lot of offseason left and they're not playing a game today, not playing a game until almost mid-September. So a lot of time left for that knee still to recover, but it would have felt a heck of a lot better. I'll tell you that much if he was out there practicing in full, no questions, no injury, no rehab, but that was not the case. And now this is going to become something that becomes more of a story. And we're just going to have to continue to monitor over and over and over until he clears whatever protocol he has to clear to get back ready and practicing on the regular. Another update was from The Rock, if you will. He does such a tremendous job on Packers.com, Larry McCarron, that is, and his breakdowns. If you don't follow Packers.com on Twitter, just Packers.com in general, for A, Wes Hodkiewicz, but B, for Rock's breakdowns, you are definitely missing out. But he had a great breakdown on TJ Slayton and basically saying that he's been watching Slayton very closely in some of the offseason workouts as well as OTAs, and that Slayton has really popped in taking a second-year jump. And I think this is one of the things that has really gone unnoticed about the defense this offseason because, you really add in some of the, and I know like Devontae Wyatt certainly got, amount of publicity, and Jerron Reed got a level of publicity, but, so much went to Devondre Campbell and Kawhi Wyatt, re-signing, Preston Smith. I know people are super excited about Rashawn Gary, the triumvirate of great corners now at corner, and then the 2 starting safeties. Like, we talk about all this, but I really do believe that the defensive line is the sort of forgotten piece of this, not just Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt maybe being the 2 that sort of hold everything together, but for the first time, really giving Kenny Clark some significant help and really having a group of players that Kenny Clark doesn't need. Let's just rewind here for a second. Over the last few seasons, if Kenny Clark wasn't on the field, the defensive line wasn't good. Period. End of story. There was not a 2 or 3 person line that you could put on the field at any point in the last 3 seasons where Kenny Clark wasn't on it and you felt really good about it. They got by at times with the Dean Lowerys and the Tyler Lancasters and so on and so forth, but there was not a lineup, in really since Kenny Clark's gotten here, that you could feel very comfortable with any 2 to 3 defensive linemen unless Kenny Clark was out there. Now, especially if TJ Slaton is ready to take a jump, Slaton, Jerron Reed, Dean Lowery, Devontae Wyatt, there's 4 right there that you put any 2 or 3 of those on the field, and I feel pretty darn good about the potential that you have to be a potentially stout, if not solid, defensive line, even without Kenny Clark. And I think the bigger thing here is that we might be able to get to a point where Kenny Clark doesn't have to play 75, 80% of the snaps. And by the end of the season isn't worn down and running on fumes because he played so many snaps over the course of now a 17-game season. If you can man up without him on the defensive line, it sounds like TJ Slaton was playing some nose tackle. If you can put Slaton at nose and then rotate Jerron Reed and Devontae Wyatt and Dean Lowery and maybe even like a Jonathan Ford, someone like that on early downs without having to play Kenny Clark that much, and during the course of a regular season, save him more for obvious passing downs. A, that helps out your pass defense, but B, it takes a lot of wear and tear and pressure off of Kenny Clark and keeps him fresh through the course of the season. And I think for the first time since Kenny Clark's been there, Green Bay has the defensive linemen to be able to pull that off if everyone can stay healthy. So I really am looking forward to this defensive line rotation. And if Rock is excited about TJ Slaton, somebody who did put some really nice tape, at least flashes of really nice tape out there a season ago, then you can better believe that I am excited about TJ Slaton as well. So that is a group that I am very excited about. And oh, by the way, they also claimed Chris Slaton off of waivers, a defensive tackle, former 7th round pick as well, which also adds depth to that group. Some other quick news and notes: Christian Watson as well as Romeo Doubs got reps with the starting offense. So as I mentioned, with Allen Lazard and Sammy Watkins not being there, it was going to open up opportunities. Well, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, opportunities served, and you know that both of those players are going to make the most of it, and those reps should serve them very well moving forward. The starting offensive line is interesting. I wouldn't make a ton of it. We know Bakhtiari was out. We know Elton is going to be out for some period of time, right? So that's going to be something that is going to play out over time. But in addition, it's just one of those situations or scenarios where I have a feeling Luke Butkus is going to say, listen, rookies, Sean Ryan and Zach Tom and, the whole group, Rasheed Walker, like, you're going to have to earn anything. We're not going to hand anything to you. So to me, this doesn't scream what the offensive line is going to really look like at any point, especially if Bakhtiari's ready and able to play week 1. But it starts off by being Yosh Nijman, John Runyon Jr., Josh Myers, Royce Newman, and Cole Van Lanen at right tackle. So not ready to jump too much into that, but those are the 5 that get the initial start. I do think it's somewhat interesting that, if they had maybe some thoughts that, all right, Bakhtiari's going to be back week 1, we want to work Yosh at right tackle, that maybe they would have done that and let Cole Van Lanen start at left tackle. But Yosh starts at left. That's the more interesting thing than anything else of that starting 5. And then the second group was maybe a little bit more actually what I sort of expected if they weren't going to do the rookies, which was Yosh at left, John Runyon Jr. at left guard, Myers at center, Jake Hansen at right guard, with then Royce Newman at right tackle. Either way, I can guarantee you once Sean Ryan and Zach Tom and maybe even, the entire rest of the O-line, basically, once those guys get up to speed. I think there's going to be a lot more competition there, and hopefully David Bakhtiari is ready to go sooner rather than later to add some more competition into that mix, and maybe Yash gets in at right tackle and again adds to the competition there. So we will see. Wouldn't make a huge deal out of it, but those were the initial starting offensive lines. Packers-Saints joint practices set up for the week before the Packers and Saints meet in week 2 of the preseason. So that will be held in Green Bay. So that'll be interesting. So, of course, the jokes are Chris Olave and Honey Badger made it to Green Bay one way or the other, just that they're members of the Saints and will be going against the Packers in practice. Love it. Think competition against another team is really good. And as Matt LaFleur mentioned, that could keep those starters not having to play in that week 2 preseason game and allow them to get reps in a more controlled environment, safer environment that are super valuable without having to potentially subject them to injury in a game. And then the other news and note was that apparently Rich Bisaccia was in amazing form and was everything we expected he would be, and being a little bit of, more of a drill sergeant for that special teams unit. Aaron Jones, Devondre Campbell, A.J. Dillon, all found on special teams. Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers, and Romeo Dobbs were returning punts, so those were some initial returners. Matt LaFleur mentioned that he's very excited about Tyler Davis. So Tyler Davis, this continues to be the offseason of Tyler Davis and the publicity that he's getting. So we'll see if he can make the most of that. And then last but not least, Darnell Savage came up with a couple big plays in practice as well, which we, of course, love to see. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Yes, I will be back here tomorrow with an all-new episode, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.